when search and rescue volunteer Jake Patterson discovered a rusted wheelbarrow buried deep in the Washington wilderness. The serial numbers etched into the metal would lead investigators to the most disturbing campground mystery in Pacific Northwest history, and reveal what really happened to David and Linda Morrison during their anniversary camping trip 4 years earlier. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this chilling story of wilderness survival and a discovery that shocked investigators, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. Now let's uncover how a routine search mission led to the most horrifying campground conspiracy ever documented. The morning mist clung to the towering Douglas firs as Jake Patterson pushed through the dense undergrowth of the Olympic National Forest on October 15, 2024. As a volunteer for Olympic County Search and Rescue, Jake had spent countless weekends combing these woods for missing hikers, but today felt different. The silence was too heavy, too complete. He was investigating reports of suspicious activity near the abandoned Timber Creek Campground, a site that had been closed to the public for safety reasons after a series of unexplained disappearances. Local rangers had spotted smoke rising from the area despite the closure, and Jake had volunteered to investigate. As he crested a small ridge, something metallic caught his eye in a clearing below. Half buried beneath 4 years of fallen leaves and forest debris was a rust-covered wheelbarrow, its orange paint barely visible through the corrosion. What made Jake's blood run cold wasn't just the wheelbarrow itself, it was what was scattered around it. Fragments of camping gear emerged from the decomposing leaf litter, a torn piece of red fabric that looked like it came from a jacket, a dented camping pot, and most disturbing of all, a Washington State driver's license in a cracked plastic sleeve, the photo barely visible but the name still legible. David Morrison. Jake's hands trembled as he called the sheriff's department. David Morrison, he knew that name. The software engineer from Seattle who had vanished with his wife Linda during their 25th wedding anniversary camping trip to this very area in September 2020. The case that had consumed local media for months before going cold, leaving their adult children with nothing but questions and grief. Within hours, the quiet forest was swarming with investigators. Sheriff Maria Santos arrived with the county coroner and a team of forensic specialists. What they uncovered over the next 3 days would shatter everything law enforcement thought they knew about the missing couple. Now, let me tell you how this nightmare began 4 years earlier, when David and Linda Morrison drove into these mountains for what they believed would be a romantic getaway. September 18, 2020. David Morrison, 52, a successful software engineer, carefully packed their Honda CR-V for the 3-day camping trip he had planned to celebrate their silver anniversary. Linda, 49, a high school art teacher, was excited but nervous about camping in such a remote location. "Are you sure there's no cell service up there?" Linda asked as David loaded their tent into the back of the SUV. "That's the point, honey," David replied with a loving smile. 3 days of just us, no phones, no distractions, like when we were first married. The Morrisons had chosen Timber Creek Campground specifically for its isolation. Located 40 miles from the nearest town down a winding dirt road, it offered the kind of wilderness experience they'd talked about for years, but never found time for. They arrived at the campground around 4 p.m., driving past the weathered wooden sign that read, "Timber Creek, elevation 3,200 feet, established 1987. The campground consisted of 12 numbered sites scattered among the old-growth trees, each equipped with a picnic table and fire ring. David selected Site 7, a secluded spot near the creek with a clear view of the surrounding peaks. As they set up their tent, they noticed they were the only campers in the entire facility. Not unusual for a weekday in late September, but it added to the feeling of complete isolation. What the Morrisons didn't know was that they were being watched. Hidden in the tree line through high-powered binoculars, campground caretaker Earl Hutchins observed their every move with predatory interest. Hutchins, 58, had been the sole caretaker of Timber Creek for 8 years. Officially, his job was maintenance and basic security, but the isolation and lack of oversight had transformed him into something far more dangerous. The campground's remote location made it the perfect hunting ground for someone with his particular appetites. Over the years, Hutchins had developed a system. He would identify vulnerable campers, couples without children, people who hadn't told others their exact location, visitors who paid in cash and left no paper trail. The Morrisons fit his profile perfectly. That first evening, David and Linda enjoyed a peaceful dinner by their campfire, unaware of the eyes watching them from the darkness. Linda sketched the sunset over the mountains while David read a paperback thriller, both feeling more relaxed than they had in months. Around 10 p.m., as they were preparing for bed, Hutchins made his move. He had done this before, 5 times over the past 3 years, and his method was refined through horrific practice. Wearing night vision goggles and moving with the silent efficiency of a predator, Hutchins crept toward their campsite. In his hand was a modified camping hatchet and a syringe filled with a powerful sedative he had stolen from veterinary supplies during his previous job at a rural animal clinic. David was zipping up their tent when he heard a twig snap behind him. "Hello?" he called into the darkness. "Is someone there?" Hutchins stepped into the firelight, his weathered face creased in what he intended to be a reassuring smile. "Sorry to bother you folks. I'm Earl, the campground caretaker. Just doing my evening rounds." David relaxed slightly. "Oh, good to meet you. We're the Morrisons. Beautiful place you have here." "It sure is," Hutchins replied, moving closer. "Isolated. Peaceful. Some might say perfect for privacy." Something in his tone made Linda look up from her sketchpad, a chill running down her spine despite the warm fire. "Well, we should let you get back to your rounds," David said, sensing the uncomfortable shift in atmosphere. "Actually, I was hoping you folks might help me with something," Hutchins continued, his hand moving toward the syringe concealed in his jacket. "There's been some vandalism at one of the other sites. Would you mind taking a look? Maybe you saw something." David, always helpful and trusting, took a step toward Hutchins. "Of course, we'd be happy to—" The attack happened with lightning speed. Hutchins lunged forward, driving the syringe into David's neck before he could react. David stumbled backward, his hand going to his throat, confusion and terror filling his eyes as the powerful sedative began to take effect. Linda screamed, dropping her sketchpad as she scrambled to her feet, but Hutchins was already moving toward her, the hatchet now visible in his other hand. "Please," Linda gasped, backing away from the fire. "What do you want?" "We have money, credit cards." "I don't want your money," Hutchins replied with chilling calmness as David collapsed unconscious beside the tent. "I want your cooperation." What followed was a nightmare that would haunt the peaceful campground for years to come. Hutchins had perfected a system of control and terror that allowed him to keep his victims alive for days, sometimes weeks, before they inevitably met their fate. Using the wheelbarrow he kept hidden in the woods, the same one Jake would discover 4 years later, Hutchins transported the unconscious couple to a concealed bunker he'd constructed over several years about a mile from the campground. Built into a natural depression and camouflaged with logs and brush, the underground shelter was invisible from any trail or road. The bunker was equipped with basic utilities powered by a stolen generator, canned food, medical supplies, and restraints. Hutchins had used it before, and each previous occupation had taught him how to better control his captives. David and Linda awoke separately, chained in the underground chamber, unable to see each other but able to hear each other's voices. Hutchins explained his rules with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "You're going to be my guests for a while," he told them on their first morning in captivity. "How long depends entirely on how entertaining you are." For 9 days, the Morrisons endured psychological and physical torture designed to break their spirits while keeping them alive. Hutchins fed them sporadically, played mind games, and forced them to perform degrading acts for his amusement. Meanwhile, back in Seattle, their absence went unnoticed initially. David had told his office he was taking a long weekend, and Linda was on fall break from school. It wasn't until David failed to show up for an important Monday meeting that their son, Michael, became concerned. Michael called the Washington State Patrol, but without knowing the exact location of his parents' campsite, the initial search was unfocused and ineffective. By the time rangers reached Timber Creek Campground, Hutchins had already cleaned their campsite and moved their vehicle. The Morrisons' SUV was found 3 weeks later at the bottom of a ravine 50 miles away, apparently the victim of a tragic accident on a winding mountain road. With no bodies recovered due to the difficult terrain, the case was classified as a likely double fatality caused by driver error. But David and Linda Morrison weren't in that crashed vehicle. They were still alive in Hutchins' underground prison, and their nightmare was just beginning. Back in the present, as investigators excavated the area around the buried wheelbarrow, the full scope of Hutchins' crimes began to emerge. Forensic teams used ground-penetrating radar to map the surrounding area, revealing not just the hidden bunker, but multiple burial sites scattered throughout the forest. Sheriff Santos called in the FBI when they realized they were dealing with a serial killer who had been operating undetected for years. Agent Rebecca Chen, a specialist in organized crime and serial predators, took charge of the investigation. "This isn't just a double homicide," Agent Chen explained to the assembled task force. "We're looking at a systematically organized killing field that spans at least a decade." The excavation of the bunker revealed a horror chamber that would have been unimaginable to the families who had trusted their loved ones to the safety of the wilderness. Inside, investigators found evidence of at least 8 different victims over a 7-year period. Personal belongings, driver's licenses, and jewelry were meticulously cataloged and stored in waterproof containers, suggesting Hutchins had been collecting trophies from his victims. Among these items were Linda Morrison's wedding ring and David's distinctive watch, an anniversary gift from his children. But the most disturbing discovery was Hutchins's detailed journal, written in a careful hand and chronicling each abduction, the length of captivity, and the specific methods used to control and ultimately murder his victims. The journal revealed that David Morrison had died on the 12th day of captivity, succumbing to infections from untreated injuries. Linda had survived 3 more days before Hutchins killed her in a rage when she refused to stop crying for her deceased husband. "The Morrison couple lasted longer than most," read one chilling entry. "The husband showed remarkable resilience, but the woman's spirit broke completely after he died." Less entertaining after that point. Disposed of both in the usual manner. The usual manner was revealed through other journal entries. Hutchins would dismember his victims and bury the remains in scattered locations throughout the forest, using the wheelbarrow to transport body parts to various burial sites. He had mapped each location in a separate notebook, treating human remains like a macabre inventory system. As news of the discovery spread, families of other missing campers from across the Pacific Northwest contacted law enforcement. The investigation expanded to include disappearances dating back to 2013, when Hutchins first took the caretaker position. But where was Earl Hutchins now? The abandoned caretaker's cabin near the campground showed signs of hasty departure. Personal belongings were scattered, and his pickup truck was missing. A manhunt was launched across 3 states. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jake Patterson, the search and rescue volunteer who had made the initial discovery, remembered something odd from his investigation. Among the debris near the wheelbarrow, he had noticed tire tracks that looked fresh, much newer than the 4-year-old murder scene. Someone had been back there recently, Jake told investigators, within the last few weeks, maybe even days. Agent Chen realized that Hutchins might still be using the forest as his personal killing ground. He hadn't fled. He had simply moved deeper into the wilderness, continuing his horrific activities in more remote locations. A coordinated search involving helicopters, tracking dogs, and thermal imaging equipment was launched across a 100-square-mile area. On the 3rd day of the intensive search, thermal cameras detected a heat signature from what appeared to be an underground structure 15 miles from the original bunker. The tactical team that rappelled into the remote canyon found Hutchins's new facility, along with evidence that he had claimed 2 more victims in the past month, a young couple from Oregon who had been reported missing from a hiking trail 3 weeks earlier. Earl Hutchins was found hiding in a natural cave system connected to his underground chamber. When cornered by FBI agents, he attempted to detonate an explosive device that would have collapsed the cave system, but tactical specialists managed to subdue him before he could trigger the blast. The man who had terrorized the wilderness for over a decade was finally in custody, but the magnitude of his crimes was still being calculated. In addition to the Morrisons, investigators had positively identified remains from 6 other individuals, with evidence suggesting there might be more victims buried throughout the national forest. David and Linda Morrison's children, Michael and Sarah, were finally able to lay their parents to rest after 4 years of not knowing their fate. The closure was bittersweet, relieved to finally have answers, but devastated by the brutal nature of their parents' deaths. "Our parents went into those mountains to celebrate their love for each other," Michael said during the sentencing hearing. "They trusted that they would be safe in a place designed to showcase the beauty of nature. Instead, they encountered evil disguised as helpfulness." Earl Hutchins was convicted on 14 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During his trial, he showed no remorse and refused to cooperate with investigators seeking to locate additional burial sites. The Timber Creek Campground was permanently closed and designated as a crime scene memorial. The National Park Service installed a plaque honoring the victims and implemented new safety protocols for remote camping facilities across the system. For Jake Patterson, the discovery that started with a simple search and rescue mission changed his life forever. He left his job in tech and became a full-time advocate for missing persons, families, using his experience to help law enforcement improve search techniques and prevention strategies. "I keep thinking about all the times I walked through those woods on other searches," Jake reflects. "David and Linda Morrison were out there the whole time, and we never found them. It makes you realize how many other secrets the wilderness might be hiding." The rusted wheelbarrow that led to the discovery sits in evidence storage, a grim reminder of how predators can exploit the trust and vulnerability of people seeking peace in nature's beauty. But it also represents the persistence of justice and the determination of people like Jake Patterson to never stop looking for the missing. Today, new protocols require remote campground caretakers to undergo extensive background checks and regular supervision. Emergency communication systems have been installed in previously isolated areas, and campers are encouraged to file detailed itineraries with park services. The Morrison family has established a foundation that provides GPS tracking devices to wilderness campers and funds search and rescue operations in remote areas. Their goal is to ensure that no other family endures 4 years of not knowing what happened to their loved ones. The wilderness that claimed David and Linda Morrison remains beautiful and dangerous, a reminder that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades. But their legacy lives on in the safety measures that now protect other families seeking adventure in the great outdoors. As Agent Chen noted in her final report, evil thrives in isolation and silence. The courage of one search and rescue volunteer to investigate something that didn't seem right brought justice to multiple families and saved unknown future victims. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when someone cares enough to look closer.